So I see Dave's name appearing on the.
Right.
Yeah.
Muted. Yep.
So Dave, you're muted. If you want to start, okay, you
Oh,
got video?
there we
You're
go.
there.
There we go. Okay.
All right.
All right. Love technology.
All right, and Don, do you think we're on YouTube now?
We are, but I have to update the embed code. One second.
Do I have enough time to go grab some more water?
Mhm.
All right, I'll be right back. I'll run.
All right.
We have exactly 0 attendees.
Shocking.
I have to say
So
that,
is that a green screen you have behind you, Ramesh?
Yes, I do.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, I wish I was where you're at.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know that I'd be brave enough to get on a plane to go there, but it still
Yeah.
looks nice once you're there.
I mean, what Martha was saying is I can go with the moon too. So
Oh.
I'll switch it back to Chicago.
All right.
So
I have to say, I like this Zoom thing though, because I mean, think of all the time that's been saved, where people are not having to drive to the meeting, stand around, wait. It's like this. I think it's great.
All right.
environmentally friendly.
Exactly.
There is that. Well, so Don, are we still waiting or are we good to go?
Yeah, no, I don't have the embed code yet. It'll be 1 minute.
Okay.
David?
I feel like I'm at work right now.
Hmm.
How many school board members does it take to start a webcast?
0. None of us are doing anything.
That's a good point. It was a trick question. Kudos, Wes. Kudos.
Uh,
I'm sure this is doing wonders on driving our numbers up.
Mhm. Still at 0. We're still at 0.
Still
I'm on.
0. Okay.
oh, we
All right.
doubled them.
I'm gonna turn this blind. Hold on.
I see Ryan Kelly. Hey, Ryan.
Yeah. And
Nice.
Brian there.
Martha, if you're looking for an audience, I can ask my son to check the YouTube stream.
He's been asking about it too, so I'm surprised he's not here yet.
You don't have to watch it. Just turn it on. And
Yeah, right. Build our numbers.
Well, let's see.
Don, are we still waiting?
Anybody do anything exciting today?
It's up.
no,
Go ahead.
No.
I rearranged my office.
Yeah.
Go ahead. It's up.
We're
It's up?
Okay.
Okay.
Hey,
All right.
All right. We're good. So it's now 7:11. We are returned to open session. At this time, is there public comment or do we have any emails to the public comment?
We did not receive any emails to the public comment.
Excuse me. Okay. So at this time, are there any changes to the agenda?
Nope.
Nope. Okay, then let's get into the superintendent report.
Sure. Thanks, Dan. I wanted to share with you that we did receive, really just around the midst of the time that I think our remote learning plan started, we did receive a response to the lease proposal that we had shared with the Hollywood Citizens Association. There are a number of changes that they are suggesting or recommending, so we do need more time to review that, but I certainly wanted to let the board know and the community know that we did receive a response, and we will continue in conversations with the HCA. As our long-term goal would be to come to some agreement about the land use over in the Hollywood School in the HCA area. So wanted to share that with all of you. Just wanted to give you also an update on remote learning here in District 96. And I'll be brief, but as you can probably imagine, and I think most all of you are experiencing it as parents as well, there's probably a lot I could say about remote learning, but I just want to take a few minutes and share just a couple key items. We've been doing a remote learning plan in District 96 since March 18th. So this is week 4 when you take that week out for spring break. We are distributing lunches to about 60 children right now. That was around 30 something, and we've kind of gradually increased. We're actually appreciative that families that are in need of these lunches are willing and able to come to the school district to do pickups on the Monday and Wednesdays that we have designated. And we're giving kids a double or a triple lunch on those days, so they go home with enough lunches for all 5 days of the week. And I really want to thank our lunch cafe crew for continuing to do that. And they feel very, very committed, as do we as a district, to making sure that that happens for children that need that. Also, a thank you to our technology team. We have now distributed iPads or Chromebooks to kindergarten through 8th grade. So at the kindergarten level, we did make it kind of an optional. If families wanted it or needed it, we would make those available. And that distribution is going on as we speak. It was started today at the district office and will continue to be available to families that need, kindergarten families that need iPads. The 1st and 2nd graders had iPads distributed last week, and that was a very organized approach done at each of our schools with a drive-by kind of curbside pickup with the iPads. We also have our team that shows up here and is also repairing technology. So if families need their technology devices repaired, their children's technology devices repaired, we have a team that continues to work at the district office to make sure that that's happening. Most importantly, obviously, is the focus on the continuity of learning for all of our students. And that means the academic instruction as well as the social emotional support and points of connection for all of our students. We have a really high participation level. We really try to measure that in what we look at as student engagement, with the idea being that the daily attendance is not the critical factor as much as making sure that all students on some level are engaged with our instructors, with our teachers, and are demonstrating that they are making efforts to continue to learn and continue to respond to the instruction that's going on in the district. But this also includes obviously a commitment to our children with individualized education plans. We have teletherapy going on for students when and where that's appropriate. So again, there's just a real wide range of the level of supports and services being delivered by our teaching staff. There's been a lot of focus on innovation, a lot of focus on just the prioritization of what feels most critical and important to learn at this time when learning is certainly unusual, that we know that this is not perfect. I know we hear from many parents, certainly they are very appreciative of the efforts. We also know parents are really, there's a lot on parents' plates, right? Many parents we know are working from home, or they are considered essential workers and actually leaving for daily jobs elsewhere. There's a lot of certainly financial stressors on families and just the stress of time and a lot of activity going on in the home. So we really want very much to thank our parents, to appreciate the partnership we have, and also to acknowledge that this is in no way anybody's first choice on how we do school and do learning in District 96, but it is our reality. And I think both parents and our teachers have really certainly risen to the occasion and are pleased at how that goes. It is certainly starting to feel kind of like, we use the term, that new normal, right? That now as we are in about week 4 of this, and we are scheduled to be in this phase, as we know, through the governor's order through April 30th. I think for anybody that watches the news and his regular updates, that we do anticipate that this will go past April 30th. We don't think that this will end on April 30th. there's a lot of speculation about whether or not this will go for the remainder of the school year. I think among superintendents and other educators, that is a strong belief that it will go through the end of the school year, but we don't yet have that confirmation, that clarification. We know once we have that, we have important other things like graduation and summer school and other critical elements to think about. I can assure you that we've already been thinking and talking about those things. It's just not yet time to make those formal arrangements or decisions. But again, just a huge thank you to this Board of Education, to our entire community, to the parents in our community, the families, to the children themselves, and certainly to our educational team that's made up of our teachers and principals and paraprofessionals, as well as our custodians and lunch crew and secretaries and nurses and everybody that's been involved in this process. It is certainly kind of unbelievable and not what anybody had anticipated in terms of how this school year would be ending, but very likely this is the pattern that we are in for the foreseeable future. So wanted to share all of that with you. Any questions or comments, anything any board member wanted to share about that, or any additional comments about that?
I'll just say personally, like, I think the the pickup process at Ames with the packets, and I've got a first grader, so we had that second wave of the iPad pickup. I mean, it was all done very seamlessly. It was fully prepared. It was easy to do. Those first couple of weeks for just me personally, we both work from home, and so having the kids here is a huge distraction and all of that. So trying to figure out how to balance all that is tough, but is that you're learning through it that first week, and then at least we had spring break, so you get a little bit of reprieve, and then you come back and you try to do a little bit better. I think that second wave, I think there appears to have been a lot of feedback to the schools individually with the feedback forms and stuff like that. I know I provided some, and the second round has gotten better. I don't want to say by any means it's easy, but it's you're figuring it out, and you're kind of making it work and setting new schedules and stuff like that. But I think the team has done a fantastic job. The district overall, I assume all the schools are kind of doing something comparable to what I'm experiencing here. But I guess thankfully we have the technology where you can get this type of stuff out. I mean, if we didn't have iPads and things like that, I mean, school would basically just stop at this point. So, I mean, given what we're going through, I think everybody's done a great job getting together and collaborating and figuring out how do we make this as easy as possible and at least try to continue some level of education for our students. It's not the same thing as being in school, but I think it's working for what it is. And, I was kind of having a thought this week, as we were having this initial debate about doing a 2-day pilot and getting feedback and seeing how it works. Well, we're getting our feedback and we're getting our pilot, that's for sure.
Yeah,
so
very appreciative that we approved that 2-day pilot, just because giving teachers time to really envision that remote learning, that e-learning. And granted, it was designed to be for a snowstorm. It wasn't designed to be for a pandemic, but I think it really did help us have a lot of assessment of our technology to think in that innovative way of what does a lesson look like when you're not physically present with a student. So I think that was a stroke of perhaps sort of good luck or good planning that we at least had gone that far.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I'd like, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Dave.
No, I'd like to sort of echo what Joel said. Wesley said. I'm glad we did this. I mean, it's been a challenge. We have, like Wesley, my wife and I are working at home, and probably like a number of people were working from home, and it is proving a little bit challenging at times. But I do want to say that I'm really glad we did approve those originally back when it was the 2 days of e-learning for an event of snow, because I can tell you from experience, people I know who are teachers, who are assistant principals, we were way ahead of the curve compared to a lot of school districts. Not only in Illinois, but I know elsewhere we were way ahead of the curve. So that was, I'm really glad the teachers did a good job, and I know we're going to be learning a lot from this going forward.
Mm-hmm. The other thing I wanted to, and Ramesh, I know, is here on our panel of participants. Ramesh, if you wanted to provide an update, so we as you all know, are also still in the midst of construction. It was a process that was started really kind of just before the pandemic hit. And we are continuing along. As you know, construction is an area that is exempt from the governor's order for stay at home. So Ramesh, I know you're some here on the line. If you want to provide an update about what's going on at Ames and at Central, that would be great.
Sure. So the last time we met for the board, we discussed suspending construction at Central, and we were trying to save some money in case the project was shut down due to the pandemic. But after the governor's order was issued and the exemption was received, Berglund approached us and said they would like to make use of the fact that the school was closed and they could start to expedite construction at Central. And sure enough, after we received approval on that process, they erected the crane at Central and they proceeded with demolition of the openings for the new elevator. And in fact, they poured the foundation earlier this week. So normally we would have been we're about almost a week and a half ahead of schedule for Central. And we have gone ahead and ordered the elevators for both Central and Ames. There are right now, we have not received any delay notices from ThyssenKrupp with regards to the elevator. At Ames, our foundation work is about 85% complete. We have block walls that have started to be placed, and they did not work on it today due to the colder conditions. But the ComEd service utility is complete. We have relocated the AT&T service and Comcast. So making good progress on that too. But at Ames, we are about 2 weeks behind because we did have a late start on the project. Berglund has the information in hand right now to work towards a guaranteed maximum contract. So they're working on that, and they intend to submit that for the board's review and approval for May. That really is where we are right now. We only have one small hiccup with procurement right now. The rain screen, which is a historical element, which is going to be used at the Blythe Park School, is procured from Spain, and the factory has been shut down for quite some time. But there's a possibility that we'll be able to make up on the procurement on that issue and have our construction proceed. It's a small element, but it's a significant historical element that is approved. So we really can't substitute that product. That really is where we are. As far as completion percentages, in the board package, you should see some financial information that's available, which indicates that Ames is about 9% complete and Central is about 5%. Since I'd issued those numbers, Ames is probably up to almost 11 or 12%, and Central is almost 10%. We're making good progress.
All right. Thanks, Ramesh. Does anybody have any questions for him? I know we have a few other items later on in the agenda, but wanted him to provide that overview.
So I just have a quick question. Thanks for the overview, Ramesh. Just at a very high level, you gave some numbers. Where are we relative to where we had hoped to be?
So Ames is a big challenge. Ames is where we are about 2 weeks behind because we started late for multiple reasons. The primary reason being that zoning hadn't approved our contract. When they approved the zoning changes in March, Berglund started to double down and work on it. They are working Saturdays right now, whenever possible. So trying to make up that schedule. I talked to Tom Szynski about 2 weeks ago, and he indicated that they would make up the time provided there's no shutdown. I mean, if the pandemic had gotten worse in Illinois and the government had shut down the project, then we would have had a challenging situation. But otherwise, we intend to make it up. And Blythe and Hollywood are intended to go only end of May, early June. So that's okay for right now. Yeah. And the pre-construction work is all proceeding as on schedule. So we're good.
Thank you.
So is there any benefit to the schools being unoccupied now? Is that helping us on either Central or Ames schedule?
Yes, it is. It's helping us, especially on Central, because Central is fairly intrusive, the work that's required. We're trying to we have already the openings made on all 4 levels of the school right now for the elevators to be placed. But the major construction, the interior construction, which is in the lower level where the old pool has to be infilled and the old administrative offices demolished, we can't really proceed with that until we get a notification that the school is closed for the rest of the year. So if we get a go ahead on that, we can bring that schedule up. We have, Berglund's assured us that they have the people available to work on that, but they're not going to demolish that area till school is closed.
Any other questions for Ramesh?
This is Joel. Sorry, I thought I was on mute. Ramesh, to your point about Blythe, that's only the rain screen. It doesn't hold up any other. It doesn't hold up the remainder of the construction, correct?
That's correct. We have no issues with the remainder of the project. We have a small relocation project that we're going to look at on Monday, which is the butterfly garden at Blythe Park. One of the teachers indicated that she believed that our construction would interfere with that installation. So on Monday, we plan to go and look to see what we can do to relocate it before our construction. But other than the rain screen, we really don't see any procurement issues yet.
Thank you.
The other thing where I feel like we'd had some nice planning and thinking, and right before the pandemic was our strategic planning considerations. As you know, we had looked at 2 organizations. We had heard from the Consortium for Educational Change, as well as an organization known as Capacity Unlimited. We were still planning to potentially hear from the Illinois School Board Association. And again, as boards are being asked to really consider essential items only during this time of school closures. But as we anticipate that the school closures could go on longer than we had originally anticipated, I guess it's more of a question for the board as to whether or not you'd want to continue to proceed with a planning for the planning, so to speak, and with an idea of it being that perhaps we could hit the ground running in the fall about strategic planning. But just wanted to share with you that hadn't lost sight of that, but also maybe get some board feedback as to a desire to move forward. I know we've really been truly in a crisis and in a crisis planning mode here. But as that kind of smooths out, and as you said, it kind of almost becomes the normal way of doing business, just curious if the board would be interested in hearing from that third group or would be interested in making a decision based on the 2.
I personally think that the third group was not going to do an extensive planning session. It was more shorter sort of thing, right? Wasn't that their thing?
Mm-hmm.
So in that context, I think a more sort of systematic approach, like the Consortium for Educational Excellence, I think is the group. I find that more interesting and appealing than a more abbreviated process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jeff.
Yeah,
I did have a question. Considering that the 2 firms that we saw when we proceed with them, they want extensive participation from staff and families. I think we're going to have to know what's happening with our buildings and our attendance and things like that. And if we're open before we engage on an actual go ahead with the process, I'm okay with approving if we prefer one, but that's a really unknown to me is how that process would begin until we know who's in the buildings. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. We know that both want to engage the community, certainly want to engage the board and staff members, and there would be ways to consider doing that virtually, probably not until the start of the year, or maybe late summer, if that was something we were, if we wanted to go ahead and make a choice, look at how we might do some of those things somewhat virtually and uniquely because of the pandemic. So, right, I think that's exactly the question is, do we want to go ahead and make a decision about the facilitator, the organization that might do it, so that we could plan for what might either be an unusual time or might be a more typical time. So I think what Linda and Jeff are saying is, maybe not So we know that the Illinois School Board Association, because they had just done this work with Riverside Brookfield High School, and I've talked with them, do a more kind of like a 1 day, engage the community for a half day, and then work with a planning group for the other half a day, which is very different than the process we heard from either CEC or Capacity Unlimited. So if there was an agreement to go with the more robust process, let's say, then we could even put on a different, a future board agenda to make the decision. Even if we don't proceed right away, it would just be to be ready to proceed as soon as we're able to.
I guess my thought on it is I just don't know at this time, at least where we're at. I don't know that we know where we're at, really. That concerns me. I definitely could hear and could value being ready to hit the ground running. I just wonder about making a 5-year plan at this point in time. It just seems like we're still in the very early stages of whatever this is, and it would be hard to project that anything we'd come up with today would be applicable, or that something else wouldn't come up in the interim next couple of years. Is my concern anyway.
Mm-hmm. Certainly a valid point. We've talked about it's hard to be strategic when we're in crisis mode, but I'm starting to wonder as the crisis sort of levels into almost an ongoing, that I don't want to ignore the need to do our long-term planning.
And that wouldn't start
Joel, I
till
think
the
I
fall
cut you
anyway,
off.
right?
What's that?
No, it's all right. Let David go.
Oh, okay. I mean, I can appreciate Dan and Sherry where you're coming from. I guess my thing is we need to sort of plan, because this is going to be. I mean, this is not going to be resolved anytime soon. I mean, if you're following the news, I mean, we're looking at. I mean, hopefully things can start to get back to some sort of normalcy. I'd say with like in the next month or so, depending how well things progress. But we're going to be in this situation. I'm envisioning for at least a year, and I think we need to. I don't think we should wait a year before we figure this out. I think we should maybe look at this, and I think I think sort of making a plan in this environment actually might be beneficial, because it's giving us a little sort of heightened sense of what really our core values are.
Joel, I think you were going to say something too, right?
Yeah, well, and I think David makes a good point, but I still think I agree with Dan and Sherry is we need to know where we are in terms of the baseline. And yes, we need to plan ahead, but until we get some more resolution or perhaps perspective on where we're at as, digital versus face-to-face, there's not that much that I want to proceed with. I'd be okay with selecting someone and they could present some ideas about how they think they could do it digitally, but we have to get community input on this. And I'm not sure how well a community forum works effectively digitally. That's very hard for wait and see.
So Wesley, I think you raised your hand.
I know there is a raise hand button, but
Yeah.
everybody can see me, so I'll just go like this.
Right.
I think if I was understanding correctly, like the process doesn't actually start until the fall, right? Like assuming normal conditions, we wouldn't even convene anybody until like fall timeframe, right?
Right. And we might have done some survey information in the spring, but we might,
But not like a 60 people get in a room type thing. That wouldn't happen till maybe like September, August, something like that. So I think, I don't know, I appreciate all of the, we don't know what's going on right now, but I think we have to be cautious that we don't completely stunt future vision because of the unknown. I think we got to kind of do both of those. Like, here's where we'd like to go, but then, I think as Dave kind of said, like doing it now really kind of raises those challenges and really highlights a lot of things that we probably didn't otherwise think of. But I get a little concerned that everybody's so focused on today, tomorrow, and maybe like an hour and 24 hours that we're not thinking about next week, next month, next year. I mean, that's still going to come, and we still need to figure out where we want to go. I don't know that where we want to go necessarily changes. It's more the means of how we get there is probably different. So, but also, you know, how are we actually going to do it? That is going to be very interesting. Like, how are we actually going to get people together and have a good dialogue about it and stuff like that? So, kind of talking out of both sides of my mouth there, but I think we've got to figure out how to plan long term under these sort of short term conditions that we're in. I think so. I think we should at least proceed with talking through it and figuring out who we think might be a good partner for this and might help us through it. The means of how we actually execute it, I think, are kind of up in the air right now, and we'll just have to figure that out as we hit some of those benchmarks.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's probably a good opportunity to discuss at the next meeting or a future meeting, the two presentations, decide on who we think we're comfortable with moving forward. And I'm sure they will have a lot of feedback about, I mean, maybe this doesn't start till next winter, but there's a lot of research and back end work that they can do, and we can get on the schedule and get on their radar and get that moving forward. So at least we're moving forward, even if it doesn't happen till when it can physically happen, at least the ball is rolling, they can get the background research they need to do, you know. So I would be comfortable talking about it at the next meeting, making a decision.
I agree with what Linda and Wesley suggest. Maybe one thing that you could do, Martha, would be to just ask these different groups how they would handle things, assuming that, as I think is highly likely, almost certain, that we will not be having 60 people sitting together in a room. How would they do that?
Yeah.
And just put it to them and say, how would you change your process, given that we can't get together?
They might even say, we're not doing it for the next 6 months.
They might say that.
We're not,
that
you know,
information right there. Yeah.
But I think if we go ahead and make a decision and then figure out, you know, how the process works.
Yeah. And I've heard from both of them informally, right, that they'd be willing to work with us in unique and virtual ways, but they would want a commitment from us before they would sort of plan and think through how to do that. So I think what this helps me, and I thank you all very much, let's put it on a future agenda. Let's put it on a May agenda. Think about, do we want to make a decision about which party to go with, even if it means a very modified timeline. But it kind of, again, sort of keeps some of the momentum that we had established, keeps us moving forward with that. So that's it. Those are my superintendent report items. I appreciate it being a discussion, and thanks very much. And next, I'll turn it back to you, Dan.
Okay, thanks, Martha. Okay, next is the approval of the consent agenda. Can the board secretary read the tonight's consent agenda?
Yes, sir. Let me get there. All right. Tonight's consent agenda includes the meeting minutes from our March 18th, 2020 meeting for both closed session and open session regular business meeting. The personnel report as presented, but I'd like to specifically call out that this one includes all of the annual administrator contracts. So everybody that reports to the superintendent. Included in those contracts is a across the board 3% merit increase per discussions previously up to this point, with the specific exceptions for Blythe Park principal and Ames principal. Casimira, what is a 8% increase, I think, in total, and Todd was a 5% increase. Casimira's was related to salary adjustment and a title change with some additional responsibilities associated with it. And Todd's additional was due to the projected, with the Ames build out and moving the early learners over there, the additional students that are going to be in his building and the families and all the stuff that are going with that. In addition to that, payables pre-list March 31st, 2020, and payables pre-list April 15th, 2020. And that is everything on the consent agenda.
Okay. Thanks, Wes. At this time, would any board member want to remove an item from the consent agenda?
Yes, I'd like to request that all of the administrator contracts be removed from the consent agenda for further discussion. And also, I think that Wesley said a 5% for the Ames principal. I thought that was 4%. Is that correct?
It is 4.
4%.
I
Okay.
believe you're correct. Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. So at this time, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda accepting the administrative contracts?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Jim, can you call the roll?
Do we have Jim?
Jim's on mute.
Yeah, Jim's on here.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Barsadi,
Aye.
Mr. Muirhead,
Aye.
Ms. Murphy,
Aye.
Mr. Marhall,
Aye.
Ms. Kleiber,
Aye.
Mr. Hunt.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay. So it's regarding the administrative contracts. Do we need to make a motion to discuss it, or what should we do on that?
I think we could discuss it and then sort of proceed to the original motion to approve them or not.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yep, that makes sense.
So yeah, the reason I asked to have them, thanks for taking them off. I guess I'd like to first come back to something that Martha mentioned in her remarks, and I think that Wesley and Dave echoed, which is that I think that the staff, the administrators, the teachers, everyone has done a fantastic job in this extremely unusual and challenging time. You know, when we met last time a month ago, there were premonitions that something was happening, but at that time, it was like the water receding when there's a tsunami, the water is pulling back, and the tsunami had not yet hit. And in that short period of a month, you know, we've gone from a situation where, you know, we had an 11-year economic expansion where unemployment was at 3.5%, and where things were going along fairly well. And now we're in a situation where unemployment is at 10%. Many economists are forecasting 20%. The world is in a recession that economists think is going to be far more severe than the recession of 2008, 2009. The many small businesses are struggling, closed, and many of them will not reopen. Many people in our community have been affected health-wise and also, you know, economically. So the world is a very different place now than it was just a month ago when the board approved these raises, which I think were very fair and very reasonable raises at that point in time. But the changes have come so fast in the last month. The world is no longer in the same place. And so I think that certainly the raises are merited. The administrators have done an excellent job, but because of the situation right now in the economy, I think that we should put a hold on these raises for now, freeze salaries for administrators for 1 year, and then next year we can reevaluate where we are at in terms of the economy. And then if things are good, we can go back and give larger raises retroactively and go from there. But I think to proceed with raises that were formulated when the economy was good and proceed with them now that the economy is probably the worst it has been, certainly in generations, I think is not a good thing in terms of the fiscal position of the school district. You know, we're gonna have problems with tax revenue. We're gonna have problems with the state. The state was already half insolvent before this happened. So I think there's many considerations I think that we need to think about. So that's my suggestion, that we sort of put a hold on these raises for now and revisit it in a year.
You know, I guess.
Go ahead, Dave.
I guess, I mean, Jeff, I agree with you. Things are changing by the day. And I mean, we don't know what the future's hold. I mean, unemployment's at 10% right now. That's historic in and of itself. Is by all accounts, you're absolutely right. It is going to very likely go higher. and there are many, many people who are struggling to make ends meet, even in our community right now. And I can really appreciate that. I mean, I guess my stance and my thoughts is that we made these decisions in different times, and these are also, I guess, these are also only a year contract, and I think we need to take that into consideration, that we made these decisions based on information that we had that was different at the time, but it's a year, and I'm anticipating that we're going to be making some pretty significant changes in a year. I think there's going to be possibly like salary freezes in a year. We're going to be looking at very creative ways to balance our budgets, but I don't really want to go back on a decision that we made that's that could very likely is based on information that we don't know what's going to happen in the next month or two. And so while I agree that this is very uncertain times and things are changing and everything's pointing towards a severe economic outlook, it's still an unknown. And again, these are only a year. I think the district is in a solid financial shape right now to do that, to weather this storm with or without these raises. But I do think that next year we'll be having these very serious discussions about salary freezes and sort of what we need to and how we're going to address it at that time.
I personally would like to, oh, sorry, Wesley.
Nope, go ahead, Sherry.
Go
I
ahead,
would
Sherry.
personally just, especially the larger increases, I'd like to revisit those at a later date, possibly beginning of next year. Our principals are amazing and exemplary, and our other administrators as well. I could never deny that. We have amazing staff. I just think in this current temporary situation, I'd like to revisit them later when we can really figure out what the impact is. So, and to be sensitive to our community.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I personally know people that are very negatively impacted by it, and on the other side, I know people that, you know, their companies are operating kind of business as usual. So it's kind of individualistic and what kind of industry you're in and all that kind of stuff. I think the interesting thing with us is we don't really, like, we're not a for-profit. We're a tax base, like our revenue is kind of known. So I guess kind of my previous comment, I get a little concerned with people with a little bit of the reactions of like what's happening right now and the projections, because that's what they are, projections. And so I think with where we're at, I think our decisions for next year might be a lot different than they are right now, but I'm not sure that the last 4 weeks has changed enough for me on this particular topic anyway, to say that we need to pull back or completely freeze at this point, since we already kind of made the decision and we already know that our revenue is there. We know what our budget looks like. We are fiscally sound, all that kind of stuff. So I totally agree. I think they're valid points. I think it could look very insensitive to some people in the community. Others in the community, I think, would be perfectly fine with it. I think it just kind of depends on your personal situation there. So I'm not sure. I've been going back and forth on this one as we've been talking about it individually, and all these various ways that we've been communicating the last month or so. And I'm not sure that I'm convinced that we need to completely pull back on it. So I'm still good with going forward with it for those reasons.
I personally agree with, I'm sorry, was someone else speaking?
Go on, man.
Go ahead, Joel.
I've been thinking about it as well, and I've had some good conversations with other board members. Right now, I believe the reasons we had for giving the additional salary to Todd and Kazmira was for good reasons. Those reasons are still going to be in place as we move forward. I think right now, as David said, I'd like to echo or compliment him for his better summary than I can do. All what he described is true. I have a feeling next year we will be much more cognizant of where we need to be. And I would not be all surprised if we needed to freeze many different salaries. But to Todd and his Miro was for good reasons. Those reasons are still going to be in place as we move forward. I think right now,
Is Joel still there?
I think he's froze there.
forward. I think right now, as
Joel,
David
Joel,
said,
maybe
I'd like
did
to
you maybe if you turned
echo
off your
his
video,
comments
perhaps
today
that
for his better summary than I can do. What he does much more, many measure it for the most part with the rest of us, much more. That's it. This helped him. Does this help?
Yeah, I think we heard you a little better, I guess, after you turned video off. So maybe that might work out better there. Does anyone else have anything to say? I
I'm
guess
comfortable. Go ahead, Dan.
okay. Go ahead, Linda, if you had something.
No, I understand all the points being said today. 100% hear what Jeff and Sherry are saying. However, I'm leaning on the side of I'm comfortable moving forward this year as we decided, and obviously next year will be a whole different ballgame most likely. So I'm comfortable moving forward.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said on both sides. I'm very sympathetic to the idea of fiscal responsibility and that the world being what it is now, it's really hard to say what's going on. I guess what leads me back to agreeing to this is the idea of just the overall marketplace in the educational side. I haven't seen or heard evidence that we would not be that we would I get the impression we would be pretty lonely if we did something like this, if we did a freeze this early in the process, and I just don't think it would be the best move for the district given what we're facing right now and the job that the administrative team has done to date. I think we definitely need to reward that and be supportive of that. But as has been mentioned, it's what happens next year is definitely will be a different time, and we'll have better information to evaluate when we get there. All right, are there any other comments? Okay, let's see. So I think, do we need to make a motion to approve the administrative contracts as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Jim, can you call the roll?
Mr. Barsati,
Aye.
Mr. Muirhead,
Aye.
Mr. Marhall,
Joel, you're muted.
Aye.
Mr. Miller,
No.
Ms. Kleiber,
No.
Ms. Murphy,
Aye.
Mr. Hunt.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, next item on the agenda is Riverside Education Council. I don't believe there anything to present there.
I don't think so.
Yep.
I will say, I will just interject that they have been great partners during this whole process, that we are really having to really consider all the unique factors of the working conditions for all of our employees, and they've been great.
All right, that's very good to hear. We definitely appreciate their support. They're being good partners with us in this.
Absolutely.
All right, are there any board member comments? Has anyone been to a performance lately?
Nowhere like this, unfortunately.
In my living room, my kids put on a performance every now and then. But
There are a lot of that. There's a lot of that. Well, it has been meant, as was mentioned before, that definitely I'm appreciative of the instructors the teachers taking time to make videos and yeah, especially for my younger kids, they've been pretty enwrapped and enthralled when those have come up. That's definitely been a popular thing.
Great.
Love to see more of that.
Mhm.
Okay, so that moves on to committee reports. First up is the facilities committee. So Wes or Joel, anything from the facilities committee?
I'm not on facilities. That's Joel.
Oh, okay.
I'm
Yeah,
on
like
personnel with Joel.
Oh, I'm sorry, I got you mixed up. My
No,
apologies.
that's all right. Maybe, I don't know, Joel might be having issues. Maybe Linda?
Yeah, I think we already heard an update from the facilities committee,
Okay.
and then
Yeah,
there'll be
big stuff.
more, and then there'll be more later in the agenda. So I think we can move forward.
Okay. All right, finance committee.
Nothing to report this time.
All right, education committee.
Nothing right now. We already heard about the e-learning and how it's going, but I'm sure we'll have more once we figure out about how next month's going. So.
Yeah.
Policy committee.
Nothing at this time.
Okay. Now personnel committee.
No, sir. Nothing for you tonight.
Okay. All right, so next then is old business. First item for consideration, the fund transfer memo and projections. So let's see, is there a motion to approve the 13 million fund transfer from the educational fund to the capital projects fund?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Jim, is there anything you want to present on this?
You have my memo. This is really getting money out of two operating funds. Well, this one's education fund into capital spending. Into the capital fund, we have another one coming up, and it matches the budget and the projections that Ramesh has put together. And so this will fund our projects, the construction we're starting on.
Isn't the total transfer is like a little over 17 million from education to the capital and then working cash as well?
We have, yeah, so tonight we're hoping to approve 17 million. And
Right.
I don't know if you remember a couple months ago, we moved 2 million
Right. No, right.
total budget for the construction.
Yeah, there's two different resolutions we have to approve, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Okay,
was
so-
told it had to be done twice. So the 13
Okay.
million is the first and a little over 4 for the second.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at two different screens, so. So, okay, that makes sense. Okay.
You watching yourself on YouTube on the other screen? Is that...
I need a fourth screen for that. I need a fourth screen for that.
I had one question. I think I answered this question myself since our last call, but we had talked about, right? I think I even asked the question, do you, like, once this is moved, it's moved. We can't move it back, right?
Right.
Like we have
Right.
to use it for capital improvement. So like I've been wondering, you know, with the unknowns and then it was more unknown than I think it is now. Should we move all of that over knowing we can't move it back? I think your comment, Jim, was, I mean, it'll get used. We've got, you know, a roofing project or a maintenance project or whatever that'll need to be in this fund in order to use it. I think from what all the updates Ramesh has given us about where we're at, and it seems like Blythe and Hollywood are still going to be on par, even with certain projects, maybe not all the projects, given what happens with HCA and all that kind of stuff. But I was just wondering, like, is the 17, this one plus the next one we're going to do at 4.2 million? Do we need to move all that over? I mean, I think the answer is yes, because it seems like the majority of these projects are going to get finished in the time that we're thinking, right? With the exception of maybe like a playground at Hollywood or something like that was in the initial budget. Is that, am I thinking about that correctly? Like, even if we only did half of it now, we'd likely have to do this again in 2 months to pay off the rest of our bills, because most of the construction projects are continuing forward, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Easy answer.
There's a good question though, I think, and that it raises another interesting question, which is I think we should talk about at a future meeting. I mentioned this to Jim and Martha, which is this notion that in the strategic in the facilities plan, the 10-year plan, we've budgeted, I think, something like $10 million for maintenance over the coming decade, roofs and that kind of thing. And obviously that's kind of lumpy, and some of it we spent some more in some years and less in others. But the question is, on years we spend less than sort of the average, let's say $1 million, like last year, what happens to that $1 million that we budgeted? And what happened, what we did this most recent year, this last year, was to basically roll it over into the operating funds, which made it sort of, in a way you could argue, artificially inflated the operating surplus, because really that money has been, it's part of the depreciation of the buildings. It's a real depreciation, and it arguably should have gone into this capital improvements fund. The other side of that, though, is the one you raised, Wesley, which is that once it goes in, it can't come out again. So there's a tension there. Well, I think we need to be aware that in years where we spend less than the average amount, that's not a real bump to the operating surplus. Right. That's actually artificially inflated, a little bit potentially misleading if we don't realize that. I hope I was clear about that, but I think we should talk about this in the future at some point.
Okay.
I guess I'll just ask you, Jeff. I mean, since you're way more involved in this than I am, like the 13 and the 4, I mean, it's prudent to do that. I mean, we need the money to pay these bills for the construction project. And I don't think we've heard anything that would say right. that we're going to be, 6 million short, and so we're going to move 6 million. It's just going to be stuck there. Like we're pretty confident at this point that this money is going to get used. Maybe not all of it, 100%, but like 90-95% of it's probably going to be needed. So it's
that's my understanding. Yeah, that's my. Is that right, Jim? That's my understanding, that pretty much all of the money we're moving now is going to be for this current set of projects, right?
Right. We don't have any information that it's changed, so.
Yeah.
I would expect that we're going to spend it on this. If there's some residual at the end, I'm sure we could put it into the next project, the next.
Right.
Yeah, budget differently for the next round with what we got in there. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Joel, I see Joel. I get to see the hand raise button. So Joel, did you want to say something?
Thank you. Is this working better?
Yeah. Yes.
It is.
Okay, this is video on the computer and audio on the phone, which does
much better.
Yeah, much better.
I suppose the only thing, we could hold off on the working cash transfer till, say, middle of summer, when we have a better clue about, for example, where Hollywood's going. I don't think we necessarily need to do all the money right now, but I would certainly do the majority of what Jim suggested. Would that be, it's not quite a splitting the baby kind of thing, but if we're worried about sequestering the money too much into the capital budget, we could hold off on a portion.
I don't know that I'm personally worried about it. I just, when I think about like we can't move it back, I guess I was just going through that process of what else would it be used for. So I don't know that I would say, I appreciate that, but I don't know that I would say I'm like worried about it. I just wanted to make sure that I had my thoughts together on this one of like what exactly we're doing here, and that the money is going to be, I mean, it's a lot of money that we're moving into a different fund that we can then no longer access for these other reasons. So I just wanted to make sure that I was understanding, like thinking through. But then I think, quite honestly, Ramesh, that update spread, like your timeline spreadsheet of where we are, you were talking about like 10% done and like that. I think that was really helpful. I think that's what pushed me over the edge to say, yeah, we probably do need to just do this now. And that way we're not trying to do this every single month, approving cash to pay our construction bills and stuff like that. But I personally, I think I'm good with it. I just wanted that to ask that question and make sure I had that clear in my head before we move forward with it.
I just have I have a question. Sort of, I'm intrigued by Joel's point. I guess, Jim, I have a question. What would happen? I mean, I haven't looked at it in so much detail, but what if we just approved that 13 million today and then held off, depending how things go, on the 4 million, and maybe approve that in like May or next month or June? I guess what would be the benefits and the disadvantages of like maybe splitting it like that?
If we transfer it all now, we'll still, looks like we would end the year at over 50% of fund balance. I think that was 4%. So I think the only real difference is we get to talk about it again at another meeting.
Okay.
We've committed to spending it to this construction, give or take a couple percent if we're off, but I would probably come back to you next month. I would prefer to do it all this year, and if we could do it the same night, I think that would be fine. We still have plenty of operating funds. It's when we do that 10-year projection that we start
right
where the operating ends up.
Yeah.
So, and then Jim, to be clear, so there are two different funds here. So I'm assuming the same rules apply from working cash, that once it's moved, it can't come back. And
once it's in the capital funds, we've got to spend it on facilities or the buildings.
Right. And then I guess I honestly couldn't think of what the implications of moving it out of working cash, what the difference for that, aside from the educational, although the educational would seem to be much more related to the day-to-day operation of the schools.
Working cash is kind of a savings account that you push it into whichever fund you need it in. You can't spend it directly from working cash. And that's been building up for a few years. It seemed to make the most sense to bring that fund balance down since we don't pay bills out of it. Move that to capital, and then we can start building it up again.
You're saying you prefer to have it done this year, meaning this school year?
Yes. I mean, we could try and time it and maybe move some in June or July, but we know we're spending it. You almost don't want it in the operating. We have more than enough in operating to get through over a half a year as is. So even if the tax payments slow down, and we're already getting payments in that were due, what was last month, I think, March 1st, maybe. Cash flow wise, there's no reason to do it. The only reason you would not do it is if you were going to decide not to do some of the projects, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense. Thanks.
Sure.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on the first item? Okay. Jim, can you call the roll?
Let me switch my hat here. All right. I got to write down my time. Mr. Marhall.
Aye.
Ms. Murphy.
Aye.
Ms. Kleiber.
Aye.
Mr. Barsadi.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Muirhead.
Aye.
Mr. Hunt.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay. And the next item is the moving the 4,228,146 from the working cash to capital projects. Is there a motion to approve the resolution to move the 4,228,146 from working cash to capital projects?
So moved.
Second.
Jim, can you call the roll?
Ms. Kleiber.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Marhall.
Aye.
Ms. Murphy.
Aye.
Mr. Muirhead.
Aye.
Mr. Barsadi.
Aye.
Mr. Hunt.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, next item is the MOU for the furniture package. Is there a motion to approve the memorandum of understanding regarding the furniture selection package as presented?
Dan, could I jump in real quick?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So on the personnel, I actually did have one thing I thought of while we were talking about this. I just wanted to try to interject it here. As part of the languages in the administrator contracts, but we had made the decision, or we had discussed closing the district office from December 25th to January 1st, which would really only be the 26th to the 31st, those 4 days of the second week of winter break. And I thought we should probably bring that up. And since we know that our viewership is relatively low, I think Martha's going to communicate that in another way as well. But since there's going to actually be an office closure for a couple days, just letting the community know that that decision was made, just for people to be able to prepare for that point in time. It's pretty low activity in the district office, not a lot going on, and that suggestion was raised through a couple different means, and we talked about it, and that actually got added into that contract language. And since it's impacting the community as a whole with it being closed, I thought we should probably just mention it, and I totally blanked on that earlier, so just wanted to throw that in. My apologies.
All right, no worries. So Martha, is that something you can add to your communication on that?
Sure. Yeah, I'll definitely communicate it to the public. I'm not sure if right now in the midst of the pandemic, it's the most important thing, but
right. Yeah.
No, definitely not.
But I will definitely make sure it's communicated. Certainly when we get closer to that holiday season, that it's cleared.
Yeah, I just didn't want that to go unstated now, because it was part of this and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, thanks, Wes. All right, so we'll come back then to the MOU for the furniture package. Is there a motion to approve the memorandum of understanding regarding the furniture selection package as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, is there discussion?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank the architects for streamlining the proposal. I think it's much more focused and streamlined than the original, and I think that that's a good thing.
Yep.
Definitely so.
Yeah.
Steve, is there anything you needed to say on that?
I don't think so, unless you have questions.
Okay, any further discussion? All right, if not, Jim, can you call the roll?
Mr. Muirhead,
Aye.
Ms. Kleiber,
Aye.
Mr. Barsati,
Aye.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Marhall,
Aye.
Ms. Murphy,
Aye.
Mr. Hunt.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, next item is the Ames Playground design. Is there a motion that the Board of Education approve the Ames Playground design as presented?
Dan, I'm going to interject here because we have actually two designs, and I know we've moved this one as a possible action item. We've had some playground discussion, but it was way back in January as a board. So certainly want to invite discussion, but it would be, the possible action would be to approve one of the designs after there's discussion on which design. So I know we're actually inviting discussion on this one, and we want there to be.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
All right, so I guess, yeah, go ahead with the presentation of the two options.
And Wesley, do you want to kind of give a quick overview of process, or do you want to turn it over to Steve and Ryan right away here?
Yeah, so I was just going to ask that. So I shared some information just to try to get some of it in front of you guys before today, and just be able to think about like the roadmap. What did we do? How did we discuss it? Who was providing the feedback and all that kind of stuff. Martha had sent an email out to the steering committee, and there was pretty overwhelming response on option one. The additional options that were updated later actually came out of some of that last minute feedback on option one, and just a couple commentary around that. So I guess the one thing I would ask is if to talk about the two designs. One thing was just around the swings. But for the most part, I guess the key thing for me is I've been thinking through this process and watching it unfold is there was a very grand picture of possibilities within a finite space. And then as we worked through zoning and ordinances and things like that, and then confines of the space, and then safety protocols and layering and all these different things, a lot of decisions ended up getting made for us in one degree or the other, or our options were fairly limited. So what we're pretty much left with is the playground equipment itself. So the site design was pretty much dictated by, and I'll let Steve correct me where I misspeak here, or Ramesh, but the site design was pretty much dictated by water drainage. That area has a lot of water in it, and so just being able to incorporate the drainage in an appropriate fashion, or ultimately more than what we even needed to, that really dictated what space we could use, and then the permeable and non-permeable spaces and the percentages that we needed to hit. We did get an ordinance variation on that. I think we were like 2% over what we needed or something. So a lot of that component played into it. And so really what's in front of us today is the actual equipment itself, and then the layout of the equipment and the cost of the equipment and all of that. And so with that being said, that was the part that the steering committee ultimately put into here. If you recall from I can't remember if it was the January or the February meeting, Steve had presented, or maybe it was Ryan presented, a brief overview of where that we came out of from that, of the exercise of laying out different pieces of equipment, and then the feedback of the kids and the parents and the staff and all that kind of stuff. So I think, having been involved in that, I think option one really hits on what I heard and the analysis that DLA did on like the keywords and the key feedback from the different parties of what kind of equipment they wanted, what kind of activities were most important, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's option one, is pretty much like what we want, so to speak, or the ideal of what people wanted. And then option two was, I guess, sort of a like, what other options could we get, kind of get most of that stuff, maybe incorporate a little bit of a cost savings potentially. And then some of the feedback was where the swing placements were, if we could put those on the perimeters and some balance beams. And so that's where some of these minor adjustments came in to throw in front of everybody, just to play with some different options there. So just kind of wanted to set the stage of that, of like how we got to this discussion here and the options that are in front of you, not having been a part of all the ongoing dialogue in the background. And from there, I mean, if there's any questions, for sure, but kind of Steve, if there's anything else that you wanted to add around the design exercise that you did, or anything like that, of what's getting presented to us.
No, I think what you have outlined is a very good synopsis of our procedure. We do have the two options available to show you tonight if you'd like. And then we have worked with Ramesh to refine some rough idea of numbers to make sure that we're within the budget. So if you'd like, Ryan can take us through the two options. Martha, if you want that to happen.
Sure. So they have an ability to share their screens. The board also has this in the board book as their attachments. And I know just today there were those minor changes with the swings and a balance beam getting added in. Those were some last minute feedback comments from the playground steering committee. Mm-hmm. So I guess, Dan, do you have a sense of, or just in general from the board, do you want to take a look at it? Do you have enough information in the board packet? Would you like us to display some things for more discussion?
I know I personally wouldn't mind seeing a brief differentiation of the two, perhaps, but again, I don't want to speak for everyone. I know we're getting a little later in the evening here.
I agree. Yeah, it might not be a bad idea just to do a quick run through. I don't think it'll take a significant amount of time, but just to do it as part of the meeting, and like if the public is going to watch this, that it might not be a bad idea just to kind of go through just maybe 5 minutes or something like that of the two options and kind of explain the differences, if you don't mind, Ryan.
Yeah, looks like my screen sharing is disabled.
Or maybe not.
Could you enable that, Martha?
Let me see. I gotta find you again, Ryan.
Tech support, tech support.
Let me see if I can give you the permission.
This is why
I think
Don
I
didn't
can
want to
make
share his
you the
video.
host. I think I can make you the host for the moment, Ryan, and then see if that allows you to share your screen.
All right.
There we go.
Yeah,
there you go.
All right. Can you see my
Yes.
All right. Bear with me here a moment. There we go. Okay. So Wesley, that was a great synopsis of what we went through with the Playground Steering Committee. And what you see here in option one is really everything that came out of that, and kind of four sort of key things that they were looking for. Accessibility being number one, and that came from students as well. Climbing features, or imaginative learning. So what we have here at the bottom is the zip line, which is the Zoom Tracks. It has an accessible seat, so it's got an accessibility option to it, and then just a regular seat for able-bodied elementary school kids. Here at the top, we've got some balance beam and some spinner equipment. That as well is accessible. And here we have swings, which the last piece of feedback that we received from the committee was it looked like that there could be some more room for balance beam and some other features if we shifted that to the outside. So we made that late adjustment, and I think it worked out well. Here on the left, we've got the early learners, and then on the right, we've got the more 3rd to 5th grade students. So split kind of down the middle, we've got the early learners to the left, and then the 3rd to 5th grade students to the right. Over here by the garden, we've got some interactive play, some additional music instruments, and I'm going to kind of scroll through some of these renderings. You'll see this rendering in plan view, but then again in perspective. So again, here we've got the early learners to the left with some interactive play, more appropriately sized equipment. The middle, you've got some balance beam and spinning features, both accessible, swings at the perimeter, as well as the zip line. And then on the far end, you've got the 3rd to 5th grade appropriately sized climbing features. So this really incorporated everything that we heard from the committee. Here in this view, you'll see some of the additional interactive play instruments around the garden and the memorial stone and bench. And that's our last image. So again, that really incorporated all the features that came out of that process, both from students as well as staff and parents as well.
Just for my own clarification, you mentioned musical instruments. Are those just essentially drums, or what is that exactly?
Some bongo drums here. This is a xylophone, and this is it's a spinning. It has like beans in it, and it spins and makes noise. So it's just another sort of interactive, sort of imaginative learning tool.
Ryan, did I hear you correctly say that the area that's behind that music, there's musical instruments, is that, you said that's a garden of some kind, or?
Yeah, it's a little garden. There's a memorial bench and stone that is existing that's going to be preserved in the construction, as well as a tree next to it that we're going to preserve. So yes, this will be a garden here. I can.
It gets really cut off of the screen for some reason. There you go. I think.
Yeah, it is a little cut off, but you can see here there's a little bit of a garden.
Mm-hmm.
If we go back.
Which currently is all asphalt, so that'll be a nice little greenery addition right there.
Yeah. So I'm trying to scroll through without making everybody nauseous here. Here we are. So playground area 2, we'll have these permeable pavers that'll line out and frame this musical instruments. And then this would be the green area. The memorial tree is here with a bench and then the memorial stone as well.
And then I know one conversation I had with Steve when we were in the bigger committee talking about, and I'll also point out, like, we did Hollywood in at the same time, just with not having a plate, like a formal place agreement in place for us to be able to build it out. We're doing the Ames one, and we'll have to revisit this with Hollywood, and it's a very similar process that we went through and everything. I don't know how to describe this. The dotted area, I guess, behind bench 2, above bench 2, and to the right of the bicycle racks is some grassy area, but there's like it was like a 3 or 4 foot drop off or something, Steve, I think. So it was a lot of that was for drainage and impermeable area that's not really usable because of the way that they had to grade out the land and all that kind of stuff. So that kind of plays into the sort of rectangular area that we have to play with, as I was talking about, like the site design, how the actual square footage of the site was actually designed out with all the other components that we had to take into consideration for this. And,
right. And related to that, just to the north of where the basketball court is, that green space you're talking about, that was part of our green space that the village asked to be, left as actual green grass space. Yes.
Yeah.
So what's the plan for that area? I mean, are you going to have like trees and sort
There'll
of
be grass. There's also, I believe, the Gaga pit is up there.
Yeah, the kickball field as well.
Are there going to be areas where you do have like shade trees for kids to sit under and read? And I mean, that would seem like a good area for that kind of thing. I mean, is that something that you thought about, or?
Well, there's room to do that. It's just a matter of if you put too many trees in, that's going to limit the kickball area, but I'm sure it can be worked out.
So we're really kind of holding the playground 2 area by the musical instruments for that, for the shade trees, for the area to read, and then also providing that open green space for a kickball field. So trying to accommodate both of those things.
And I think, I don't know that we really take it into consideration, but I think there's some trees along the property line that might provide some shade around that bench 1 area on the right side. Depending on what time of day and what time of year, I don't know how much shade it'll actually provide, but there are some trees on the neighbors' properties that might bring us some of that aspect to it.
There's definitely one thing that it sort of strikes me as I'm looking at the basketball court, which is how are you planning to prevent balls from getting thrown over into the neighbor's yard?
Well, we do have a 4-foot fence around the entire playground area, including the basketball. Obviously, you could throw a ball over a 4-foot fence, but that is a local ordinance in terms of height that we were dealing with. So we would have preferred to go a little bit higher. What I will say is that, as Wesley mentioned, here beyond bench 1, all along this perimeter is 2 feet lower than the playground area. So that's effectively a 6-foot drop. But in terms of the height of the fence, that was all we could do by local ordinance.
Okay, anything further on option 1?
No.
Oh, I just had something very, very minor. I noticed in our first drawings that, Ryan, it's mentioned that it's mulch for the playground surfacing, but then it's called engineered wood fiber. Could you is that just exactly the same thing, or is there a difference?
There is a difference. Mulch is not used in playgrounds. It is an engineered wood fiber that's specifically for playgrounds. So mulch is not the appropriate term.
Yeah, I was wondering why it was different. Like the first drawing said mulch, and I wasn't sure if it was like a garden or what was happening there.
No, it's that was a conceptual word that was used. It's not the appropriate product name. So.
Isn't it also kind of referred to as like playground mulch? It's not really, it's like more of like a safety mulch, not actual just chipped wood that we dump down and give people.
No, it is it's technically called engineered wood fiber.
Yeah.
So it is for, specifically engineered for playground surfacing. So.
And
That is, go ahead.
The depth on this is, it's 12 inches deep also, just to put it in perspective.
And that was one, thank you for bringing that up, Sherry, because that was something I was going to mention, because I know a lot of the staff was very much for the, it's not poured rubber, but not the chipped rubber, like the solid rubber service, just from like an ADA compliant and just usability. I think a lot of the staff was thinking about tracking that back into the building, and that flatter rubber surface would be more attainable to like cleanliness and stuff like that. We were not able to use that because it didn't help, or it detracted from our ability to hit the permeable surfaces compared to the pre-engineered mulch or whatever we just called it. So that's why the mulch, so some of the designs have that like rubber design inside of it, but it is the mulch or the engineered stuff that's going to go in there to help us meet the permeable area space that we need for the site overall, not just the playground, but the overall construction.
Could I piggyback a question on that? I think maybe Steve or Ryan could answer this. I think the engineered wood fiber is actually fairly safe for concussions and other type of, injuries. So I feel like we've got a nice safe base there, even if, because we had to for drainage. And I think it also just matches what we have in the village, which is nice. But
yeah.
Yes, it is absolutely appropriate for the fall zones within the playground area. Yes.
The other thing that I'll just point out too is that, accessibility had been a key goal of the playground steering committee, and Steve, upon his additional research, also pointed out that the engineered wood fiber is considered accessible. It has to be appropriately maintained so that like a wheelchair or a walker could move, safely and, reasonably comfortably across that kind of surface. So that was another good piece of information that we were able to share back with the committee.
Any other questions on option one?
Oh, I have one. I'm sorry. I keep asking a question. What about colors? Because this drawing is like very moot in color. Do the staff get to choose that, or the kids, or does it come in color because it looks so muted in the drawing? Because they're little kids,
It does come in color, and that's something that we can walk through. We just wanted to keep it consistent in terms of how the rendering looked. So we didn't.
Oh, I totally get that. I just wanted to know, who gets to do that.
It would not be gray. So we can select colors, and we would, work with the school and the committee to find some colors that probably reflect the
Okay.
Ryan, that's something we'll have to research, right? Because we had heard that the village might require us to use the like brown, green, kind of the earth tone colors.
Yeah, I've had some initial conversations with Sonia and the village.
Okay.
There's no specific color requirements.
Okay.
Good.
We'll work through that.
Okay.
And so that was you kind of hit on something I wanted to also mention, Sherry, that I was asking a lot about with the bidding process that I wanted to get into after the designs, like how that's going to work and like what our options are and things like that, just to make sure we all have a full understanding of what we actually get to choose when we go out to bid as well. So I don't know if we want to talk about that now, or do you want to go through design 2 and then maybe wrap up with like that as part of next steps?
Why don't we show design 2 just to have you have a comparison?
Yeah.
So the goal here with design 2 was to hit all of the functional marks that we did with design one, but to do it in a little bit more of a budget friendly way. So here again with option 2, you'll see that the playground is split into 2 areas. On the left, the early learners, and on the right, you've got the 3rd to 5th graders. What we don't have in this option is the playground 2 area with the interactive musical instruments. And what we also don't have with this is, I would say, as much parity between the early learners and the 3rd to 5th graders in terms of climbing and balance. So as you notice in option 1, in this early learner 2 area, there was an additional climbing structure with a slide. That is no longer in this option, but there are some additional balance pieces of equipment here in the center. So as I go through some of the renderings, a better idea. So again, hitting the same functional requirements that came out of the committee, the swinging, the accessibility. This is an accessible swing here. Your standard swings at the perimeter, balance, pieces of equipment that are also accessible, and then some imaginative play for early learners. And again, the climbing structure for the 3rd to 5th graders. So the goal here was to, give a second option, a different group of equipment, a little bit more budget friendly, but still hitting all those functional marks.
And from my perspective, I think this would be a very nice playground as well. I think it does fall significantly short of what I heard from the kids. I mean, I think I heard zip line at least 100 times, and by parents too. I don't know why, but the parents were on board with the zip line too, and so that doesn't have that here. I think the music feature that was over on the side was kind of a nice little thing that it didn't get as much commentary, but there was general want or a like from a lot of the students and the parents about having something different than just physical play, but having some of the musical abilities here. This climbing structure's pretty cool. You've got one, and so when I think about this, I don't know, when you go to the park or the zoo or whatever, we've got some of these more confined climbing spaces. I'm just thinking about like the number of kids that are there, and they're all going to kind of gravitate to this, where I think the other design spaces allow out a little bit more. So it wasn't, most of the people on the steering committee didn't give that level of feedback, but based on the little snippets of feedback, that's kind of how I was interpreting a lot of them gravitating towards option 1 versus this option 2. As I think almost everybody said, either option would be great and the kids will love it. The preference from the steering committee would be option 1 because there's just a little more to it and hit on a lot more of the things that they thought. And we don't know until we go out to bid, but we feel like option 1 is within budget, and this would be something that would just be, I think, a little bit, assuming a little bit more scaled back relative to that budget overall.
What was the relative?
Not actual portrayals of the trees that are on that property line. I think those are there for just appearance sake.
No, I think you're right. Those are not, they're not that quite that many.
Just in case anybody was curious.
Joel, I think you were saying something.
What's the relative budget difference between the 2 options?
Ramesh, you want to answer that?
Yeah, I'm trying to be as generic as possible since these are going out to bid. So I won't hit on the, I won't hit on the, so I won't hit on the numbers. The delta is about 75 to 100,000.
Oh, thank you.
All right, any further questions on this? Well, so this was listed as a possible action item. Was this something we wanted to vote on tonight?
So and I know typically, and it would probably be our preference to give everybody longer, certainly if we want to take longer to think about it. There was a timeline issue here that we're up against. And I know that was, if the board was comfortable to make a decision tonight, it would certainly help our ability to go out to bid and work on procuring the equipment, with the goal being to be able to do this at the very early part of next school year, late summer, or early fall, right, Ramesh?
The main reason we are trying to get board action on this today is we would like to marry this with Berglund's contract, since they're already doing the underground work in the same area. And right now, if we go out to bid, we get the numbers that we expect and we award in May, we believe that we can try and complete this project by late August. So it's a very favorable timeline for the project.
Ramesh, is there any downside to when you go out to bid to actually getting bids on both option 1 and option 2? I mean, they're not so different conceptually. Both of them have the same sort of general layout and the same kinds of things. Would it make sense to get bids on both of them, and then we can decide when we see the actual numbers?
Yes, we could. The only caveat there is we are trying to make this as generic yet specific, if you see what I'm getting at, so that we don't get a sole source bid. We can't do that. So when Berglund puts this out to bid, the idea is to get as many vendors to bid on them. So if you give them 2 options, the complexity and then the choice of picking a successful vendor gets a little bit more complex if the numbers are close. We definitely can go out and get bids on both. It's just that if you get multiple bids and say one of the contractors does not match that exact swing set, would you be able to award to him then? Would you want to award to him? Because remember, it's a generic bid. That's the only complexity that you have. The more choices you get, the more difficult it gets to make a decision in the end. That's the only catch. We definitely could get both bids, both options bid. That's not a problem. I'm just trying to say that from decision point, it'll be difficult. That's all.
Okay.
Well, am I also hearing you say that it would likely be more expensive? That if we were, to bid for both options?
No, it won't be more. It won't be more expensive. It's just that we are trying to encourage bidders, as many bidders, to bid on the project, and you give them 2 options, and then you're trying to get to suppose there are 3 bidders. So it means they're essentially getting a combination of 6 numbers. You're trying to reduce the generic portion of this particular bid. But Jeff, I don't see at this time, really, to be honest with you, we can get both bids.
So Ramesh, I guess I'm just, if I can just sort of summarize from my own understanding, it sounds like if we're going to get essentially, if we go out for bids on both of these on 2 designs, we're going to essentially get 6 bids back that we're going to have to decide on the options, essentially.
We are trying to get multiple vendors to bid on the job. I mean, that's the goal, so that we can get some competitive numbers. But every vendor will not have exactly the same sets. So all I'm saying is that suppose vendor 1 who bids the lowest number, but he has 4 of the 7 elements out here in his bid. The other 3 are closed substitutes. Would you accept it? I'm just trying to reduce the amount of what do you call bid confusion, if that's the word you want to use.
So this was something that I was trying to wrap my head around too, because as we were talking about a lot of the other, plumbing, electrical, elevator, structural, masonry, all that kind of stuff, right? Like you pick the lowest bid or the lowest responsible bid.
That's correct.
Where with here, because there's a little bit of variability that goes into it, as I think what Ramesh is kind of stating here is like, you go out to 3 bidders, they're not going to have this exact piece of equipment that Ryan has on the thing, but they might have something similar to it. And that might vary the cost. And so if we have a cost differentiation of, let's say, just to use small numbers, 10,000 versus 15 versus 20, we could hypothetically pick 20 if it closer matched our design. And so what we're trying to do, what I think what Steve helped me recognize was, we don't go out and say, I want this exact design and you got to go find something that matches it. But what I want is a swing. I want 2 swing sets. I want this type of a balance beam, whatever that is from your supplier. I want this type, something similar to this type of climbing structure. It must have a slide. It must have a, whatever, but not, so it's like generic enough for variability, but specific enough to say it has the features that you want. So it's a little bit different than like an electrical bid or a masonry bid or something like that.
So Wesley, so if I can just understand, so using those numbers, so if we got 3 bids back, one for 10, one for 15, one for 20,000, I know we need to go with the lowest bid on like sort of like if it was a new construction project or something like that. Could we legally go for like the $20,000 bid if it was something that more fit what we were looking for, or are we bound by that $10,000 bid? Or maybe
I can answer that.
Okay.
I can answer that. We spoke to Brian Crowley about this. He said we can make a judgment call and go with the higher bid.
Okay.
Within reasonable parameters. We shouldn't be picking someone who is 3 times as high, but who's within close, because we can say it's like the best value to the system.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're not, to answer your question, we're not completely bound by the lowest bid, but we can't just go with the highest, but like it's got to be a little bit more of a balance. The way I've kind of rationalized it in my head is when you're talking about a building, I mean, Steve's team is saying, I exactly want this. And they build the Lego set based on what the architect drawings are. Whereas this is a little bit more variable based on the types of equipment that they're actually going to come back with, because not every bidder is going to have exactly the same type of equipment, where with those trades, they're going to use the same gauge, they're going to use the same brick, they're going to use the same, whatever. And so that's kind of the difference between the two.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm sure Steve and Ramesh are cringing every time I try to use that, but that's how I sort of rationalize it in my head.
Well, the only other thing I'll add is, so if the board says we do want to go with option 1 versus option 2, what we will do is we will identify the equipment that is shown in the renderings. We will identify those pieces of equipment. We will call it the basis of design, so that all of the bidders know that that is the preferred equipment. And that's what they're to base their number on. And again, to go with what Wesley said, if they have something that is very close to it, but maybe not exact, they will bid that item, but they have to call it out to us to let us know it's not exactly the same. Does that make sense?
No, that makes
Steve, yeah, but I mean, we're going to say in our bid that we want something equivalent to each piece of equipment.
Right.
That there's going to be a zip line. Whoever the manufacturer is that zip line, as long as it gets us close to the basis of design, that ends up being an acceptable bid, correct?
That is correct. Yes.
That's right.
Right. So if we did that for both options, both option 1 and option 2, then we would specify sort of we need a zip line and we need a swing set and so forth. I guess the advantage to me of bidding both is that if we're making a decision based on primarily on the cost difference, which I think is all we would base it on now, we have a recommendation from the committee, and the only reason I think we would sort of not go with the recommendation is because it's more expensive.
Yeah.
But we're assuming that the difference in price is something along the lines of what Ramesh is saying. It would be much easier to actually make the decision if we actually saw the numbers and said, oh, you know what, these are the actual numbers and they're much higher than we thought they'd be, or much lower, or whatever. So that in that sense, I think having that additional information of having prices on both options, even though I agree with Ramesh, it does make things more complicated. I think it gives us more information at the end of the day to make a decision.
Ramesh, do you think less companies will bid if we do it that way? Is that your hesitation, or is that what you're
No,
okay.
No, it's just the combination. Don't worry about it. We'll make it happen.
I hadn't thought about
With
that.
that
But that's
being
a good point, Jeff. Sorry, go ahead, Joe.
With that being said, I think we should bid out both options. We could be pleasantly surprised that option 1 is much less higher than option 2.
Right. Sure.
So Ramesh, let's just plan on option 1 and option 2 and we're good.
Yes, it's a very tight time frame for bidding because we plan to bring this before the board by the May board meeting. So the idea is to get all the numbers vetted by the first week in May.
And actually, Ramesh, you had talked about using the May 6th meeting, called a special meeting to potentially bring back bids for both playgrounds and the furniture, right? So that, again, we could, if the board was comfortable, take action on both those items and begin to move forward with the process steps.
Right, because both the items have a relatively long lead time. So we do need to move pretty quickly if the numbers are favorable.
So I guess I have a question for the board then. Are we comfortable making a decision knowing that we'll only have maybe a week or two to look at this stuff prior to the meeting?
Actually,
I would be.
Ramesh, you were going to say something?
yes, by the time we receive the bids and we vet them, the timeline to actually review it will be fairly small if we are looking to make a decision in the first week of May. Because our intent is to bid out on the 20th, receive numbers by the 30th, finish our initial review, negotiate and make sure all the information is there, and make a recommendation to the board by the 3rd. That means there's a 3-day window to make a decision. It's fairly quick. Or, I mean, obviously can be rejected too, so.
I just want to make, I guess my thing is I just want to make sure the board is comfortable with it. I'm comfortable going forward at that, in that time frame. I mean, given the criticality of this, but I'd like to know what other board members think.
There's also another element as to why so it doesn't feel like it's a rush. The main reason why we're bidding the playground equipment through Berglund is, since Berglund is an insured contractor on site, they are there right now, and a subcontractor to them can work on the site while they are there, while Berglund's there. If we go out to an independent bid in, say, June or July, that contractor we award to cannot come on the site till Berglund demobilizes, because Berglund's ensuring the safety and security of the site while they are doing construction. So that's the other reason why we are proceeding with this construction as a subcontract to Berglund. There's a big advantage from a timeline and the fact that Berglund's doing the underground work. They will coordinate that with this vendor so that we have a unified construction timeline. If we go with a different contractor in, say, June, July, the person can very well come back and say, oh, Berglund messed up, it's not done correctly, and he can come back for a change order. There are all these complications that come in. So that's why this is a fairly tight timeline. It feels rushed, but there's a logic to it.
So for the reasons that Ramesh just outlined, I'm comfortable answering with David's question. I'm comfortable with proceeding according to this timeline, even though ideally it would be better to have more time. I understand the reasons why you recommend it, so I'm fine with it.
Do we need to approve like a official motion for
Was
to approve
going
these?
to go back to that. Yeah, if
Okay.
people are comfortable bidding both.
I was afraid we were going to leave and not do that.
Well, we'll definitely do that. If that's what people are comfortable with, we can definitely do that. So it sounds like that's what people are comfortable with. So.
Yep.
All right then. So is there a motion to approve the Ames playground designs? I guess option 1 and option 2 as presented.
So moved.
So we have technically we have 4 options in front of us. I think we're gonna go in board book. But the 2 that Ryan shared were the option 1 with minor changes and option 2 with minor changes. Those were the ones you shared, right, Ryan?
Yeah.
just to be clear on what we're voting on. So, okay.
Okay, definitely appreciate that clarification. All right, I think I heard move in a second. Jim, can you call the roll?
Jim, you're gonna have to mute yourself again. Mute, you're on mute.
Yeah.
Jim, you're still on mute.
Jim's on mute.
There we go.
There he is.
Mr. Miller.
Aye. Aye. Yep.
Is it okay? Okay, took a second to do it. There's a little delay there. Okay, Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Barsati.
Aye.
Mr. Marhall.
Aye.
Mr. Muirhead.
Aye.
Ms. Kleiber.
Aye.
Ms. Murphy.
Aye.
Mr. Hunt.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, next item is a new business discussion, also a possible action item on the early learners tuition waiver consideration. And I should note that if we do end up voting on this, I will abstain since I have a child in this program and I could potentially benefit one way or the other. So I will abstain. But go ahead.
Should we have Martha become the host again in case Ryan wants to leave since he's still the host? I didn't want you to keep you here.
I think you have to switch me over, right? I think now you have you just say, like, go to your little pin dots and move me to the host.
In case you had other things to do.
Yeah. Thank you, Ramesh,
Dan,
and
can
Ryan, and
we-
Steve. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Can we give them permission to go?
That's fine
Unless
with
they
me.
really
Sure.
are interested in early learners.
Ryan might be stuck.
Trying to figure out how to do that. Just one moment.
On the bottom right is a leave meeting.
He's wondering, but he has to change.
Yeah, he has to change host.
If you find Martha in the panelist list, you should be able to right click on her, or you should, when you select her, you get the option, more options, and one of them is to make the host. So
Thank you.
pull up your panelist list.
There we go.
All right.
There we
All
go.
right, there you go.
Thank you, Ryan.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks.
I love your tech support icon, by the way.
See ya. Thank you.
Bye, Steve.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Steve.
I figured Ryan didn't want to stay for that and be the host.
Yeah, good call.
Good call. Good call. Definitely. Let's see. So Martha, was there anything you wanted to mention in regards to the early learners tuition waiver?
Sure. So we received a couple of emails and phone calls, not a lot, but from our early learners family. So that is the one tuition-based program that we have in the district, and certainly in this pandemic era, even though we are delivering remote learning opportunities to our early learners. As we know, that's our population of 3 and 4 and young 5-year-olds, perhaps. That's a very different age group to engage in remote learning, even though I think our early learners teachers have done a great job of pushing out activities and even manipulatives and that kind of thing for kids to do at home. It does seem to be well worth the board's consideration as it relates to just school fees, is to waive the month of May and to not collect any tuition. Jim, you have some data on that you've shared in terms of the revenue modifications that would be in place if we were to waive the May tuition. But it would be our recommendation that we waive the May tuition for all families who pay tuition.
I'll just say, to me, it kind of makes sense. What are you paying for at this point? And it kind of falls in line with a lot of other industries and stuff like that are kind of recognizing the same thing. So to me, this feels kind of like a no-brainer. Or at least I think it does. I don't think we don't have any cost to this right now, right? Because none of the children are in school, so.
I mean, our real costs are obviously we're continuing to pay our staff.
There's salaries.
Okay, yeah, fair. All right.
So what does like, I guess, I mean, you don't have to get into specifics, but I guess what does e-learning look like for this group, and what will we be I mean, are we going to be, is the program going to end then, or I mean, what are we going to be doing?
No, that's a great question. So we are going to continue to do the remote learning that we have offered to the families. So it's been everything from some online story times to, again, sending home manipulatives. It's been a lot of paper packets of information, suggestions of kind of in-home activities. And again, this is not a group of students that really function independently. So again, things that can be parent-child activities, but it's, you know, for families, like some of the families that reached out said that they were essential workers and had to then also go find childcare. You know,
Right.
was early learners doubles is a nice childcare option, at least for half families. So it's, you know, I want to certainly compliment the efforts of our early learners teachers to recommend some engaging activities that can be done at home that are learning activities for this group of children, but it is very different from that working independently, the need for either additional childcare or supervision in the household. So, and again, it's, yeah, I guess I answered it there. Sorry.
What is the how many people do we have teach right now on the early learners staff that are exclusively devoted to early learners?
So there are 3 full-time teachers, and then there's paras, and I don't have that exact number in front of me. I could get that. Now, keep in mind that the children with IEPs that are in the early learners program, children with the individualized education plans, children with identified special needs, are still needing to get their special education IEP services. It's the children without the IEPs, what we call our community students, that are the ones that are paying tuition, and that's the group that we're looking to waive that tuition amount. But our teachers still have an obligation, certainly to the children with IEPs, and then they've looked to continue to support the children without IEPs in some ongoing learning activities.
That is additional information I wasn't taking into consideration, but I think kind of going back to our earlier commentary, you know, I don't know exactly the families that are in this, but if you are of somebody that is essential and this was your childcare option with the benefit of learning, or you are furloughed from your job right now and this is just another expense, I mean, I kind of maybe just more my general gut rather than my board hat or fiscal responsibility or whatever, this kind of to me feels like the right thing to do given the current environment.
I agree with Wesley. I mean, we changed the deal. The deal was they come and we take care of them for a couple hours, and whether they learn anything or not is unclear. But at least that was the deal. Now now the deal's changed, and we can't. I don't think we can. I don't think we can charge tuition. I totally agree with that.
Yeah, I 100% agree.
Yeah, I agree also.
Okay.
Sounds like we might be comfortable to take action then.
Yep.
It would just be nice to have that communication then to provide to the families and actually make the refunds for some people that have already prepaid that tuition.
Yeah.
Yep.
As opposed to delaying it. Yeah.
Yep.
I would be good with that. Or I'd be comfortable.
Yeah. Agreed.
All right. Then is there a motion to approve the early learners tuition waiver as presented?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Second. Sorry.
Jim, can you call
Just
the roll?
pick one of us. Pick one of us.
1, 2. There we go.
Approve the minutes after I write them, please. Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Barsati.
Aye.
Mr. Muirhead.
Aye.
Ms. Murphy.
Aye.
Mr. Marhall. I see
Aye.
that chat there. Okay. Ms. Kleiber.
Aye.
And Mr. Hunt abstain?
Abstain.
Okay. Motion passes.
Okay. We are back to public comment. Is there any chance we got any emailed public comment during our broadcast here tonight?
I did not get any emailed public comment. I just double checked, so I did not.
Okay. Well, if not, then future meeting dates are May 6th, 2020 Committee of the Whole meeting at 7 p.m. list Hollywood Elementary, but we'll still be here in all likelihood. May 20th, 2020, regular business meeting, 7 p.m. in the Hauser, well, not Hauser, but we'll see. Maybe by May 20th, maybe in the Hauser Learning Resource Center. The board will go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting, but I would say that the May 6th then would likely be considered a special meeting so that we could potentially take action on the playground bids and furniture bids.
Yep. Right. Yep.
We're comfortable with that. We can state that publicly now then.
All right. And so on May 20th, the board will enter into closed session at 6:30 p.m. if necessary and return to open session at 7 p.m. And if there is nothing else, the meeting is adjourned.
All right.
All right.
All right. Good job, guys. We
Yes,
did it.
we did.
For the first time.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
Hi.
All right. Have a good night.
You too, everyone.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Don.
Yes, thank you, Don.
Yes, thanks,
You're
Don.
welcome, guys.
All right.
Stay healthy.
You too.
You too.
You too.
Bye.
Thanks, Don.
Mhm.